September 14th, 2026, 14:31 local time. The Persian Gulf, approximately 67 nautical miles northeast of Bahrain and 41 nautical miles southwest of the Iranian coastline near Bandar-e-Lenge. The sun is at 71 degrees elevation. The air temperature is 47 degrees Celsius. The surface of the Gulf is a flat sheet of mercury-colored heat shimmer, barely disturbed by the slow forward motion of the largest warship in the United States Navy. A Gerald R. Ford-class nuclear-powered aircraft carrier is operating in the Persian Gulf for the first time since 2012. A deliberate, politically authorized strategic signal ordered by the National Security Council in response to 3 weeks of escalating IRGC interdiction operations against commercial shipping in the Strait of Hormuz. The carrier is the argument. Its presence is the message. Every government in the region and every government watching the region understands what it means when a Ford-class carrier transits the strait and takes up a holding pattern in the Gulf itself. The carrier is escorted by a 5-ship screen, 2 Arleigh Burke Flight 3 guided missile destroyers, 1 Ticonderoga-class cruiser, 1 fast attack submarine running submerged 12 nautical miles ahead, and 1 littoral combat ship assigned to the inner defensive ring. The carrier's flight deck is active. 2 FA-18E Super Hornets are in the break, coming off a combat air patrol to the north. 4 more are spotted on the deck, 2 in pre-launch configuration in the waist catapult positions. The carrier Air Wing's E-2 D Hawkeye airborne early warning aircraft is on station at 24,000 feet, 90 miles to the northwest. This is maximum presence, maximum signal. Welcome. Tonight on Navy Legends, we are examining the scenario that sits at the center of every classified carrier vulnerability study produced by the U.S. Navy in the past 15 years. The one the planning community refers to informally as the golden hour problem. What happens when the most powerful conventional warship ever built, surrounded by the most sophisticated defensive screen ever fielded, operating in the most contested and surveilled maritime space in the world, is struck? Not by a nation-state military with ballistic missiles and satellite guidance, by drones, cheap ones, lots of them, built in a warehouse, launched from trucks, guided by commercial GPS and a $400 flight controller board. This is a fictional simulation. Every system named here is real. The tactical problem is real. The question it asks is one that no one in the public conversation has fully answered. Let's go back to September 14th. The intelligence picture had been degrading for 6 days. Not in the sense of worsening threat indicators. Those had been elevated since the Strait interdiction operations began in late August. Degrading in the specific technical sense. On September 8th, a U.S. signals intelligence satellite that had been providing continuous coverage of IRGC drone assembly and storage facilities in Fars province suffered an anomalous orientation failure and dropped offline for repositioning. Its replacement coverage did not achieve full operational capacity until September 13th. 1 day before our timestamp. 24 hours of reduced overhead surveillance of the most active IRGC drone logistics network in the region. In those 24 hours, the IRGC Aerospace Force had moved. The operation had been planned for 11 weeks. It was designated internally within the IRGC as Operation Sher-e-Zakhmi, Wounded Lion, a name that reflected both its purpose and its emotional logic. The Iranian leadership had concluded, after extensive internal deliberation, that the carrier's presence in the Persian Gulf was not a deterrent to be accommodated. It was a provocation to be answered, and the answer had to be large enough, dramatic enough, and costly enough to establish a new deterrence threshold. To demonstrate that the cost of bringing a carrier into the Gulf was higher than any political signal it could deliver. The operational concept had 3 layers. The first layer was the primary strike element. 160 Shahed 136 loitering munitions. The delta-winged kamikaze drone with a 50-kilogram shaped charge warhead. Cruise speed of 185 kilometers per hour. Range of 2,500 kilometers. radar cross-section of approximately 0.05 square meters. These were not the Shahed 136 variants that had been employed in Ukraine, which flew singly or in small groups against fixed infrastructure targets. These were a modified variant, the Shahed 136B, with an upgraded guidance package that allowed the drone to receive a mid-flight target update via a compressed encrypted data link and execute terminal maneuvering against a moving ship target. The terminal guidance used a combination of GPS positioning and an imaging infrared seeker in the final 3 kilometers. The same general principle as the imaging infrared seeker on the US JSOW glide bomb applied to a weapon that cost $20,000 to produce. 160 of them, launched in 8 sequential waves of 20, timed to arrive at the carrier's defensive screen in overlapping 4-minute intervals. The second layer was an electromagnetic suppression element. 12 modified Mohajer 6 medium-altitude drones carrying electronic warfare payloads. DRFM-based jamming systems designed to create ghost tracks in the Spy-6 radar picture. Overload the Aegis engagement software with spurious contacts and degrade the communications links between the carrier and its escorting destroyers. The Mohajer 6 jammers would orbit at 8,000 meters altitude, 65 kilometers from the formation, outside the effective engagement range of most short-range defensive systems, but close enough for their jamming to be effective against the target frequencies. The third layer was a terminal ballistic element. 8 Fateh 110 short-range ballistic missiles, solid fuel, road mobile, CEP of 8 to 10 meters. Targeted on the carrier's last known position with a planned time on target of T plus 22 minutes from the start of the drone attack. The Fateh 110 carried a 650 kilogram high explosive warhead against the flight deck of a carrier, 332 meters long, 78 meters wide, 3 inches of non-armored deck plating. A 650 kilogram warhead detonating on the deck surface during active flight operations would be catastrophic. The attack sequence was designed around a single central insight that IRGC planners had derived from 14 months of studying U.S. carrier defensive doctrine. The golden hour problem. A carrier strike group has extraordinary defensive depth. Its layered systems, the Hawkeye's radar, the destroyer's SM-6 missiles, the cruiser's SPY-1, the ship's own RIM-116 RAM launchers, the Phalanx CIWS, the electronic warfare suites, can defeat almost any realistic threat, but they can only defeat threats sequentially. Each engagement takes time. Each defensive weapon consumes a finite resource, and the defensive capacity of the inner ring, the systems that protect the carrier itself at close range, is not infinite. At 1431, 8 IRGC mobile launcher batteries, dispersed across 3 separate locations in Fars province and on the islands of Abu Musa and Greater Tunba, simultaneously activated their launch sequences. 160. Shahed 136B. Loitering munitions left their box launchers in the span of 94 seconds. The E-2D Hawkeye detected the launches at 14:32:17. 77 seconds after the first drone left its launcher. At the drone's cruise speed of 185 kilometers per hour, 77 seconds translated to approximately 4 kilometers of flight path already completed. The Hawkeye crew immediately began broadcasting on the strike group tactical net. Hammer, hammer. Multiple airborne contacts bearing 047 through 063. Count estimated 100 plus. Assess hostile UAV swarm. Immediate action. In the carrier's Combat Direction Center, the Battle Watch captain had the picture at 14:32:22. The number was immediately clear. This was not a probing attack or a harassment raid. 160 simultaneous inbound contacts represented a deliberate attempt to exhaust the defensive system. The defensive allocation math, run by the Aegis Baseline 10 software in the lead destroyer, took 1.4 seconds to compute the problem and present it to the tactical action officer. The result was not reassuring. The strike group's combined ready inventory of SM-6 missiles, the primary long-range interceptor suitable for engaging slow, low-altitude targets, was 44 rounds distributed across the cruiser and 2 destroyers. Against 160 targets in 8 overlapping waves, 44 SM-6, even at high single-shot kill probability, would exhaust before the 4th wave reached the inner defensive ring. The ram launchers aboard the carrier itself. 4 RIM 116 rolling airframe missile launchers, 21 rounds each, 84 total rounds, would need to handle everything that penetrated the outer layers. The 2 Phalanx CIWS mounts on the carrier's deck, 1 forward, 1 aft, would handle the final ring. The numbers were survivable, but only if every layer performed at the high end of its performance envelope simultaneously, with no degradation from jamming, no target-rich saturation of engagement software, and no coordination failures between ships. At 14:33:01, the 12 Mohajer 6 electronic warfare drones arrived at their jamming orbits at 8,000 meters. Their DRFM systems activated. The SPY-6 radar picture on the lead destroyer's display immediately began showing additional ghost contacts. Spurious tracks injected into the radar return that the Aegis discrimination software began flagging as probable false contacts, but could not immediately eliminate. The processing load on the Aegis combat system increased by 34% in the first 12 seconds of jamming. At 14:33:44, the first SM-6 engagements began at a range of 47 nautical miles. The lead destroyer's tactical action officer was firing 2-round salvos at priority contacts. The leading edge of Wave 1, 20 drones in a loose lateral spread 4 to 6 kilometers apart. The SM-6 active radar seeker performed well against the Shahed 136B's radar cross-section at that range. In the first 4 minutes of SM-6 engagement, 31 drones were killed by 38 rounds, a solid hit rate of 82% against real targets, with 5 rounds wasted on ghost contacts generated by the Mohajer 6 jamming. At 14:37, the second wave arrived at the SM-6 engagement range. The destroyer's VLS was now drawing from its remaining inventory. 44 rounds minus 38 equals 6 remaining SM-6, shared between the 2 destroyers and the cruiser. The cruiser contributed 18 of its own SM-6 inventory to the engagement, bringing total remaining interceptors to 24. Second wave, 20 drones, 24 SM-6S available. 16 fired in the second wave engagement, killing 14 drones. 8 SM-6S remaining. Wave 3 arrived at the engagement zone before Wave 2 was fully resolved. The Aegis software was now managing 23 simultaneous active tracks within SM-6 engagement range. 3 target assignments conflicted. The same drone track was assigned to interceptors from 2 different ships, wasting rounds. 2 tracks were lost momentarily in the jamming environment and reacquired 8 seconds later, inside minimum SM-6 engagement range. Those 2 tracks transitioned to RAM engagement by the time Wave 4 began arriving at the inner defensive ring. 14:41:20, 10 minutes after the attack began. The outer SM-6 inventory was exhausted. The carrier's RAM launchers were engaging. The 2 destroyers' own RAM systems were engaging. The cruiser had repositioned to optimize its own phalanx coverage arc. The engagement mathematics at 14:41:20. Approximately 74 drones had been killed in the outer layers. 86 remained in waves 4 through 8. The carrier's RAM launchers had 84 ready rounds. The carrier's phalanx mounts were in autonomous mode, 160 drones, progressively reduced to 86 by the outer defensive layers, now pressing against the carrier's organic close-in defense. A defense with 84 RAM rounds and 2 phalanx mounts. The RAM launchers performed at the high end of their performance envelope. In the 9 minutes between 14:41:20 and 14:50:14, the 4 RIM 116 launchers fired 79 rounds and killed 67 drones. 12 Shahed 1. 3-6 Bay drones penetrated to phalanx engagement range. Inside 2 nautical miles, the 2 phalanx mounts engaged in autonomous mode, their 20mm Gatling systems tracking and firing in overlapping arcs. In 4 minutes and 11 seconds of continuous engagement, they killed 7 of the 12 penetrating drones, expending 5,800 rounds of ammunition. 5 Shahed 136B drones struck the carrier. The first hit the flight deck aft of the number 3 elevator at 14:51:03, detonating its 50-kilogram shaped charge on the non-armored deck plating. The explosion opened a 3-meter diameter hole in the flight deck, killed 2 aircraft handlers and wounded 6, and ignited a fuel fire in the elevator shaft that would burn for 40 minutes before suppression teams brought it under control. The second struck the island superstructure at 14:51:07, impacting the lower tier of the flight control module. The explosion killed 3 air wing officers in the primary flight control station and destroyed the primary flight deck lighting control system, rendering the forward catapults inoperable until emergency switchover to backup systems could be completed, a process that took 22 minutes. The third and fourth drones struck the flight deck simultaneously at 14:51:09 and 14:51:11 in the waist area between catapults 3 and 4. 2 FA-18E Super Hornets spotted in pre-launch configuration absorbed the blasts directly. Both aircraft were destroyed. The deck plating in the impact area buckled and deformed. No catapult launches were possible from positions 3 and 4 for the remainder of the day. The fifth drone, its terminal infrared seeker confused by the heat signature of the flight deck fires from the first 4 impacts, struck the water 18 meters off the port bow. The warhead detonated on impact. The blast wave and fragments caused additional casualties on the forward flight deck. The carrier was not sunk. It was not in danger of sinking. Its nuclear propulsion plant was undamaged. Its below-deck watertight integrity was intact, but it could not conduct flight operations. In the 18 minutes between the first drone strike and the end of the attack, the carrier, the argument, the message, the irreplaceable instrument of American power projection, had been rendered operationally incapable of the one function it existed to perform. 14 sailors and officers were killed in the 5 impacts. 41 were wounded. The Fateh, 110 ballistic missiles, the third layer of the attack, launched at 14:53:22. Time to arrive at T plus 22 minutes from the start of the drone engagement. The strike group's SM-3 interceptors, held in reserve throughout the drone engagement, engaged all 8 inbound ballistic tracks. 6 were intercepted cleanly. 1 SM-3 missed, and a backup round was fired. The second round intercepted the target at 14:58:03. 1 Fateh 110 had its guidance degraded by the lead destroyer's AN/SLQ-32 electronic warfare system and impacted the ocean 2.4 nautical miles north of the formation. All 8 ballistic missiles were neutralized. The counterstrike was authorized by the theater commander at 15:04, 13 minutes after the first drone impact, under the now familiar framework of ROE Directive 7 Alpha. The authorization covered 3 target sets. The Mohajer 6 electronic warfare drone orbit positions, prosecuted by 2 FA-18F. Super Hornets already airborne on combat air patrol that had been unable to engage the low-altitude drone swarm without risk of fratricidal fire. The Fateh 110 launch sites in Fars Province, prosecuted by a salvo of 14 Tomahawk Block 5 cruise missiles launched simultaneously from the 2 destroyers and the cruiser. In the drone storage and preparation facility on Abu Musa Island, prosecuted by 2 B-2. A Spirit stealth bombers diverted from a Diego Garcia alert pad that were already airborne and reached the target at 17:22. The Mohajer 6 drones were prosecuted with AIM-120 DAMR-AAM missiles. 4 of the 12 jammers were killed before the remainder descended below the engagement floor and escaped to the north toward Iranian airspace. The Tomahawks reached the Fateh 110 launch sites at 15:49. 11 of 14 launch vehicles were destroyed in their dispersal positions. 3 had displaced to alternate positions and were not struck. The Abu Musa facility was destroyed comprehensively at 17:22 by 2 GBU 57A/B massive ordnance penetrators. The 30,000-pound bunker-busting bomb, the largest non-nuclear weapon in the U.S. inventory, dropped from 40,000 feet altitude. The hardened storage bunkers beneath the facility, reinforced concrete walls 3 meters thick, were penetrated and destroyed. Post-strike imagery confirmed total structural collapse of the primary and secondary storage areas. The repair assessment for the carrier was filed at 2200 on September 14th by the ship's executive officer, who had assumed command when the commanding officer was evacuated with blast trauma injuries from the second drone impact. The estimate for return to full flight operations was 96 hours for temporary repairs, enabling limited flight operations, and 45 to 60 days in a naval shipyard for full restoration of flight deck capacity. 45 to 60 days. The carrier that was the argument, the presence, the signal, was going to be a liability to force planning for the next 2 months. The NSC convened an emergency session at 16:30 Washington time. The deliberation was heated. The chairman of the Joint Chiefs made a point that will appear in every subsequent doctrinal review of this engagement. The carrier had been defended successfully at the system level. Every defensive layer had performed within its design parameters. The outer layers had reduced 160 inbound threats to 5. The SM-3 had killed all 8 ballistic missiles. By any engineering measure, the integrated air and missile defense system had worked, and yet 5 drones, costing an estimated $100,000 in total production cost, had rendered a $13 billion warship operationally incapable for 2 months. That is the golden hour problem, not whether the carrier survives. It survived. The question is whether survival at that cost, 14 dead, 41 wounded, 2 months of lost operational availability for the centerpiece of Pacific and Central Command Force structure, constitutes a deterrence success or a deterrence failure. The IRGC did not sink the carrier. The IRGC demonstrated that the carrier can be operationally neutralized for $100,000 in drone costs. That demonstration is the message. That message will be studied in Beijing and Pyongyang and Moscow and every other capital that has been watching what asymmetric warfare doctrine can actually achieve against the most powerful naval force in human history. This is what Navy legends exist to confront, not to celebrate or mourn, but to understand with absolute clarity. The carrier is not obsolete. Its capabilities, its versatility, its ability to project air power from international waters without requiring host nation basing rights, those remain strategically irreplaceable. But the carrier's survivability in a dense drone threat environment is a solvable engineering problem only if the solutions are funded, developed, and fielded at the pace the threat demands. Directed energy weapons. The AN/SEQ-3 laser weapon system and its successors can kill Shahed 136 class drones at the cost of approximately $1 per shot from an effectively unlimited magazine powered by the carrier's nuclear reactor. The technology exists. The prototype systems work. The question is whether the acquisition timeline matches the threat timeline. On September 14th, it did not. 14 sailors answered that gap with their lives. Stay informed. Stay vigilant. I'll see you in the next one.